Good evening and welcome again to this day 3 of the Management Development Program, focusing on the evolution of leadership in the 21st century. I trust you're all well and eager to take more in terms of what has been covered in the last 2 days. And of course, today's session will be slightly different in that it'll be a panel discussion. The panel will be moderated by Kyle, and I want to thank everyone for their participation. And remember that if you have any questions, to use the Q&A function so that we can pick up the questions and get the panel to respond. So without further ado, see we're up to about 260 participants, which is lovely. Good evening to everyone and welcome once again. And I'll hand over to Kyle, who will moderate the panel discussion. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Prof, and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It is a day 3 of the MDP series, and welcomes if you haven't joined us for the last 2 days. Where have you been? We've covered a lot of insightful topics. So thank you for joining us. I have the privilege of moderating tonight's session. With me, I have some of the industry leaders in their field in South Africa. So we're really privileged to have all of these people to join our panel. Firstly, I want to say thank you to them for joining us. Thank you. I know you guys are very busy and you've cleared out some time to really share with us in terms of leadership and the evolution in the 21st century. So thank you so much. First up, I'd like to introduce Sameera Ahmed. She is the founding member of Pinnacle Human Capital. Sameera's core focus is on leadership and transformation, and she is a certified Gallup's coach. Sameera holds a psychology degree, a postgraduate qualification in business administration, certificates in labor law, strategic management, training and development. Additionally, she holds professional membership with SABPP, as well as Comensa. So welcome, Sameera. She is also going to be my co-moderator for the session. Next up, I have Taffy Mukeredzi. Taffy is the Chief Technical Officer for Marshall Worlds of Sport. Taffy is really responsible for guiding the technological transition into the digital area for his company, and also including this with the 4th Industrial Revolution. Taffy has over 15 years experience in leadership and manufacturing, as well as in consulting and technology of the economy. He really believes in driving transformational strategies in complex organizations, focusing really on adding business value. Taffy is qualified as an industrial engineer. He also holds an MBA from UKZN, and he is currently completing his research for an MCOM in information systems. So welcome, Taffy, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kyle.
Last but not least, I've got Robyn E. Sinclair. Robyn is the managing director of the Learning Organization. Robyn took over the business in 2012 with a passion for skills development and a vision to enhance and grow the organization into skills development. As the leader of TLO, Robyn believes in leading through a collaborative leadership approach with emerging and consultation with internal and external stakeholders, from key to developing, implementing successful strategies, not only to transformation, but in the EDT sector, but also as a skills development maximizer. And if I'm not mistaken, I know that Robyn has completed a honors degree with the University of Pretoria. Am I right, Robyn?
That's correct.
Perfect. And just to give you a brief introduction of myself, if you don't know who I am, my name is Kyle. I'm the HR executive for Autoboys. I'm a CHRO 2020 nominee. I have completed my BCom degree with Regent Business School. I've completed my BCom honors degree with Mancosa. I have certifications in labor law. I am also an SABPP member, as well as a certified Gallup strengths coach. So as you can see, we really have industry leaders that is here to really give you some insightful feedback, conversations, and really recap the last few days that we've had, the last 2 days that we had, and share your questions and concerns with us. Our details are up on the screen, so you are welcome to follow us on LinkedIn. We share some valuable thought-through leadership articles as well as conversations that we drive. We'll also share this a bit later, but for now, let's get to know our leaders a little bit better. And I have some questions for them, and I'm going to make them a little uncomfortable, but I guess that's what transformational leadership is about. So let's go first. Sameera, congratulations, firstly. You were nominated as Standard Bank's top woman in the category of Young Achiever Under 40, and also the fastest growing female-owned SMME. This is quite an achievement, so congratulations. I know you currently work with other business leaders to really help transform their organization. How do you help organizations transform? I mean, we know that you're really passionate about gender empowerment. Tell me more. Who do you look up to for inspiration in mentorship?
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for that very, very warm introduction. Before I get to your question, I just want to say it's such an honor to be sharing this platform with such an esteemed panel. It's also moreover such a privilege to be talking to such an amazing group of participants. Over the last 2 days, you guys have shown such amazing insight and you've blown me away. So thank you so much for having me and sharing this platform with me. Just to go back to your question, Kyle, South Africa has been talking about transformation since the dawn of time, since the dawn of democracy. And the transformation agenda of South Africa has been so slow. Organizations have been slow to transform, and really the purpose of my company is to partner with organizations to build a realistic transformation agenda. And we really just start by reviewing the workforce, the organizational structure. We identify gaps that contribute to discrimination, pay disparities, exclusion, and disempowerment. And together with the company, we work on workable solutions that address these concerns over time. In terms of who I look up to for inspiration or mentorship, I've been fortunate enough to grow up in a house of very strong women. My mother has overcome tremendous obstacles to be successful. She's fought demons to find happiness. Outside of that, I find inspiration from the likes of Thuli Madonsela, Maya Angelou, and any strong women that demonstrate authenticity, a global mindset, and a real desire to give back to the community. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Sameera. Guys, thank you so much for your comments. Please make use of the Q&A function as well as the chat function. We will really be answering your questions live. So this is not something that we sort of pre-scripting here. Share your questions with us. We'll get one of our panelists to answer those questions, or even if you want one of them to answer your specific question, let's put them on the spot. That's why they're here. They're transformational leaders. They know how to deal with pressure. So thank you very much. So put your questions on in the Q&A or the chat. We'll get to it. And thank you. And once again, well done, Sameera, for that. Taffy, I see that smile. I see you so eager to speak. Let me get on to you. So you are currently the Chief Technical Officer for the group of companies for Marshall's World of Sport. Now, I can only imagine in your role, you constantly have to drive innovation and be ready for change. How do you generate ideas for your organization?
Well, thanks a lot for the intro and the chance to actually share some insights with Robyn, Sameera, Prof, Seedat, and obviously the participants. It's been an amazing past 2 days, of interacting with people, and the interaction and the questions have been wonderful. So to answer your question, change, as we all know, is constant. It's probably the only constant that we have. And that change is coming from all angles, from competitors, from customers, from even the company itself. And it's a huge challenge. So what I prefer to do, or the approach that I follow, and I think I mentioned it in conversation yesterday, is that being in charge of the technology of a company, you can get caught up in looking for all the bells and whistles and, you know, the latest and greatest toy that is made available to us. However, that's not usually the answer. And I believe that to address, to be innovative, it has got to be something that works within the organization. So the first issue I try and address is to understand the organization's pain points. You know, every organization has some pain points that it has to deal with. And these pain points provide the use cases, and these are the starting points for the application of innovation. So you've got to look internally, first and foremost, as to what do you need to address. The second most critical issue is that you need to provide a safe space for innovation to work. Unless you have that, you cannot expect people to try out new things, to create something different from what they've seen before. You have to support new ideas and to test them and get those ideas to be business ready before you go and try and apply them to the business. Because the fastest way to fail is trying to deliver something to business which is half-baked and doesn't solve people's problems. So what we do is that once every month, we have sessions that we undertake, and we pick something that we believe is an issue that is impacting on the business, and try and brainstorm, you know, in a very relaxed environment, and try and brainstorm with the team in terms of how best can we try and address this. And then that is the starting point. And then we then try and apply, you know, those things and test them. And we've got to be open to change. And if you're open to change, you can drive change. You understand what is required. And therefore you can articulate that change, because another big aspect of whether you succeed or not in any change process is whether you get the change management process correct. So if you understand, if you yourself as an individual are open to that change, it's easier for you then to articulate that change to others and get them to share the vision. And then obviously the last issue, and I keep bringing this up, is that stay close to your people. Any change, once you've got through the innovation space and you've come up with something, any change comes with anxiety, because some of the change that you're going to introduce, unless it is framed correctly for people, it might impact on people's jobs. And that comes with anxiety. And if that is not addressed, that change will be very painful. And more often than not, it will fail. So I think with those few things, those are what I would say, you know, that is what I would apply. And I use this process time and time again, whenever we have to try and address some issues, you know, particularly from a technology space. Thanks.
Thank you, Taffy. That was such insight that you shared there, love. The display of inclusive leadership right there. It's really indicative of the last 2 days where we've spoken about transformational leadership, inclusive leadership, and really bringing people on board to navigate through change and keep those energy, those ideas flowing. Robyn, if I can move over to you, you've got such extensive experience as an industry leader in the learning and development space. I think the learning and development space right now is so critical in a post-COVID world as we navigate this new normal. How do you continue to grow and develop as a leader?
Hello, Sameera, and thank you for the intro and the questions, and good evening, everybody. And so much welcome to everybody that's listening and that has been participating so tremendously well these last three evenings. So Sameera, yes, you know, interesting question, you know, to continue to grow and develop as a leader. I think there's definitely, you're looking at the growing and the continuation thereof, because leadership is not something that is static. It's dynamic, it's forever evolving. You forever have to look at the industry trends, what is happening outside, What are the new things happening? And it's not just about looking at the industries and the changes around us that we've all seen, you know. When I'm looking now at COVID, I'm looking at lockdown, you also see that it's in the midst of the digital revolution. And also if we're looking at 4IR with the new skills that is required, where the upskilling of existing employees, it doesn't matter what level they are, you know, if it's even from your from an entry-level position, or even the people within an organization. I think, you know, we all had to upskill, and we all had to see, where are we now? What skills do we need to actually evolve and grow and really get out on the at the other side, stronger than before? So really, it's very much about your mindset. You know, are you going to look at challenges in your life or in the world and go, oh my gosh, you know, this, I can't handle it, I'm going to wait for things to disappear? Or am I going to say, my word, you know, this is actually, it gives us a new challenge. There's so much opportunity out there. So it's really about your perception. It's the way that you look at the world, and how you see. Do you see consequences for everything that you do, or are you looking at the opportunities? I think even there's the, if you look at the definition of crisis, it is where challenge meets opportunity. So definitely growing and developing as a leader is definitely about mindset. It is about cultivating a growth mindset, you know. And when I'm saying growth mindset, I'm saying as a leader, you are still a person. So you have all of these different aspects in your life. You know, you're looking spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, socially, financially. And I do believe you need to remain curious. And never be afraid to ask questions. Ask questions, and ask, very important, ask for feedback. Feedback from your peers, feedback from other industry leaders. You know, what is working? What can be done better? And, you know, how do you truly lead? How do you lead, motivate, and inspire people? And what is working, you know, what is not working? So learn from others. Collaboration, you know, if I can also say, how do you, in these times that we are facing, it is about collaboration. It's about collaboration with your own team, with the people at the office, you know, and it's not just the management and the leadership team, but it's also to ask, you know, your staff, your lower level employees, because they often come up with great ideas and suggestions. And then, of course, like what we're doing now, you know, even being on the panel for a webinar, I think, you know, we are forever learning. We can never know more. So yes, continuing to grow and develop as a leader. Yes, it's about harnessing the mindset. Yeah, asking questions, motivating people, and always looking out for challenges.
That's amazing, Robyn. Thank you for that, because you touched on some really important points, particularly around the need to upskill and reskill oneself so that we can remain relevant in an ever-changing world. I like the fact that you spoke about a growth mindset, because I think it's so necessary, more now especially than ever before. And one of the other things that you touched on was the power of curiosity. And I often use this, you know, it's important to ignite that flame of learning and to just never stop learning, because the more you learn, the more you grow, the more you're able to challenge yourself, and the more sustainable you become over time. So thank you so much for that. We really look forward to hearing your insights later on. Kyle, I'm going to now put you in the hot seat. So Kyle, you've recently been nominated for a CHRO award. Wow, well done, congratulations. You're an HR executive for the Auto Boys group of companies. You know, you've been nominated for being a leader under 40. What, in your mind, are the most important attributes of successful leadership, or successful leaders today?
Yeah. You know, I think, yeah, well, thank you, Sameera, for that. I think, you know, leadership doesn't have an age definition, you know, and especially working in organizations, you know, we often think that we need to be in a position of power to actually be a leader. And, you know, funny enough, you know, we say some people are natural leaders, you know, as they grow up, you know, from their young ages, you know, in school and so forth, you know, I don't want to say I always knew I'll be a leader, but I sort of knew already now as I'm older that I always had you know, some leadership qualities, those things that were there. However, it's important, you know, that people can sort of together, you know, behind the ideas, manage to really achieve a common goal. And if you don't have this natural trait, you know, that's okay. You can still become an exceptional leader. And you do this by studying habits of other successful leaders in your industry. And, you know, something that we do often is we often look outside of South Africa, where we have, you know, we look for leaders, you know, from USA or Europe, but we have so many good leaders within South Africa that we fail to look up to them. And I think, you know, I mean, and I can say this, one of them, you know, is Prof that's on here. I mean, you know, he's highly acclaimed in the academic field. He's a leader in his generation, and he has influence on the rest of us. And it's important that we look to people like this within our context. And I think it's also important, you know, as some of the attributes to really demonstrate, you know, power of communication skills, empathy, you know, vision, strategic thinking. And these are really some of the desirable qualities of what it takes to really be a good leader. And it's also important to remember the combination of traits which really will enhance your leadership style for you to deliver top quality as well as move your team forward. And I think we've been speaking the last 2 days really about when do I use transactional leadership and how do I use transformational leadership? Because you're going to have to really, you know, get you, you know, sort of in tune of how do you do this? You know, how do I balance the both, which is important. But those are really some of the sort of traits that we have.
Great, thank you so much, Kyle.
Perfect. So, you know, there was a question that came up, and I think it was really directed to Taffy. It says, change is good, but what is your take on the change to digital transformation really resulting in job losses?
Thanks, Kyle. That's always a very difficult one to answer, because there are many drivers of change. And, you know, we saw on the first day what Amazon was trying to do, you know, in terms of increasing efficiencies and trying to do that through people. And usually that can result in a very toxic culture where people are overworked. And as we always say, you know, human beings are not robots. And the reality of the world that we're living in is that the more pressure there is on organizations to meet the financial metrics, the closer they get to looking at some aspects of technology that will replace human beings in their jobs. That's the reality that we live in. And I don't think we can get away from that. However, I think what we need to be doing in organizations is to be sensitive to that and make sure we prepare individuals for when that change comes. So we can start reskilling people and try and save as many jobs as we possibly can when automation comes in. And if that is done and you upskill and retrain people and reassign people, what you're doing is that there are some mundane tasks that you can automate. But the focus of any digital transformation should never be to get rid of jobs. I think the moment you approach it from that perspective, you know, it's not really going to serve a purpose. And I really believe that job losses are sometimes a consequence of that, but it's framing it correctly and bringing it into the organization in such a way that you try and preserve job loss or jobs.
No, definitely. I agree with you. I think, you know, the mindset is important and we need to really embrace technology because it is really the future of work. You know, one of the questions came through, Sameera, and this one was directed for you is, does a leader need to be talkative and have charisma to be good?
Thanks for that question, Kyle. So I do a lot of coaching, and this was really a great question to ask because there is this perception that exists that in order for a leader to be effective, in order for a leader to be perceived as great, that leader must be extroverted, must have the gift of the gab, and must have the charisma to lead. But leadership is something it's a skill that's cultivated over time. And if you are able to connect with people through building great relationships, if you are able to communicate effectively and inspire those around you, you can be a great leader. And I think sometimes we often undermine our own ability to be that great leader because we're trying so hard to measure up to somebody else's definition of great leadership. And I think it's important that we start to focus on our own talents, harness our own strengths, because the reality is that there is no other you, and that's your power. You are enough. Thank you.
No, definitely. I think, you know, what you're saying is so true. You know, it's really about, you know, not just having the talk, but really about, you know, having that influence on people. Talking about influence, there was a question for Robyn that came through earlier this morning, or earlier during when we started the panel. The question was, what role does influencing play in leadership, Robyn? You have to unmute, sorry.
Oh, my apologies. Thank you, Kyle. What a brilliant question, actually. And I think those people that's been attending the last 2 evenings would even be able to answer that question, because influence by nature is leadership. We influence by motivating, leading, and inspiring our people towards success, towards becoming better, and even inspiring them, how can I say, to become better, but to reach their potential. And often people don't know what their potential is. So whatever style of leadership we adopt, and we've discussed various leadership styles, you know, situational, you know, transformational, transactional, you know, servant leadership, whatever. We are actually influencing others. Because it's through our influencing how we are able to create buy-in from our followers. And by creating buy-in from our followers is also how we build trust. So I think for me, what is very important here, if we're looking at, you know, how does influencing, what are the role that influencing play in leadership, is that we need to become more self-aware. We need to know ourselves. Because the quicker we realize how we can influence someone, and that you can only really do through self-awareness, to see the effect that you have, the impact that you have on other people. In saying that, it's very much, as a leader, you'll need to look at, you know, your own beliefs, your own values, because those are unconscious in your psyche, as I can say. I often say that your beliefs and your values are, or if they were written on your forehead, for example, we will have less conflict and a lot better, smoother communication, because it's our unconscious filters how we predict the world and how we actually deal with people. So it's really, we need to be the change. We need to look at how are we influencing people? Is it working? And if not, we need to change something, because our beliefs, our values, and the impact we have on others will either empower or disempower others. And to be self-aware is very important, to recognize the influence that you have on other people.
Thank you, Robyn, for those insights. You mentioned something which I thought was a really great point. You spoke a little bit about low trust. And I think, you know, when we've been talking over the last couple of days around transactional leadership and how undermining certain values or certain behaviors in an organization can create a low trust environment, you know, it often talks about the culture and how sustainable that business model actually becomes. Kyle, there was actually a question for you just around organizational culture. And the question was around what is the most important aspect of leadership and culture, and how do you overcome a low trust environment?
I think, you know, thank you, Sameera. I think, you know, it's important, and I'm glad, you know, there's words of leadership and culture that's there. You know, I think leadership is critical, and you know, sort of leaders really create and reinforce norms and behavior that is expected really within culture. I think we watched, you know, the case study yesterday of Ceridian, and we've looked at some of those employees and some of those values. And I think, you know, what leaders really need to stress is the importance, you know, of how important culture is for an organization, you know, but also, you know how to confront crisis that will come up in an organizational culture, and also what role model do they want to play to the people that's following them, and sort of, you know, who they bring in and how they remain in the organization is also important, because as leaders we make decisions of hiring and so forth, and we need to hire the right people that really embodies the culture of organization, you know, so it really carries through that leadership from that perspective. You know, there was another question that came up. Sorry, Sameera, I see there was another question that came up directly to me, and I think it talks a little bit about one of the stuff that we're doing now. Was what advice would you give to someone going into a leadership position for the first time? And I can remember, you know, my first time being in, you know, in a managerial position, but at the same time, you know, sort of having this influence now on a group of people. You know, normally I was in the sideline, but I think, you know, it's important to know that when you're in a leadership position, you know, you're there for a reason. People have seen qualities and traits in you that makes you a leader. And it's important that you also know that, you know, you need to start developing yourself and start doing that personal mastery and self-reflection and saying, okay, I know I'm really good at this stuff, which is great. How do I better myself in this? You know, I know that I need to work with maybe, you know, a little bit on communication. How do I do this? Those are some of the things that are really, really important. You know, when you're going into leadership position, is to read books, you know, follow through from other leaders, watch YouTube videos. You know, there's a lot that one can do, you know, really from that sort of perspective in terms of leadership. I saw one of the questions that was actually coming through. I just want to find it here. Sure, there's a lot of questions, but please, you know, keep them coming. There was one question here that says, how do you ensure constant innovation in a fast-changing industry, especially following the COVID-19 pandemic? I don't know if Taffy wants to grab this question.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I think COVID has been unprecedented in the impact and what it's brought to all of us, and how it has pushed us to the edge, you know, and a new way of thinking, so to speak. But I think, you know, in order to face it almost seems counterintuitive that in order to face the challenges that have been brought on by this unprecedented pandemic, which we in our lifetimes we've never really experienced something as impactful as this, is we've got to kind of go back as well to some tried and tested ways of managing self, you know. Yeah. And one of those that will never change is that we've still got to set goals. We've still got to look at it and say, what is it that we want to achieve? And that's a very basic step, but it's very critical, because if you don't do that, you know, if you don't know where you're going, any road can take you there, you know. So you've got to understand what those goals are. Then again, you know, the one thing that COVID has brought to us is we must be open to change. We must be open to change, because if we don't, then the whole world will move past us. So once you've set your goals and you set up the plan to achieve your goals, you've now got to be open to change, because some of those goals may require you to behave differently. There are organizations that could never trust people to work from home, but unfortunately, you know, they were then forced into that by what? By COVID. So you've got to be open to that change, and you've got to be able to learn from people around you as well. You know, I mean, how did you do this? What happened? And so on. You know, you can't be an ocean of infinite knowledge yourself. You can't know everything. Nobody does. And therefore, it is very, very important for individuals to be able to relate and talk to people and get information and learn. And, you know, so the being open to the change also comes together with the learning, and reflect on your progress. You know, you've got to be able to reflect on your progress, go back and check, see how far you've gone and what you've done. If you need to tweak your course, then by all means do so, so that you should be able, you continue to achieving your goal. And I think, you know, all of us went through very trying times during COVID. You know, it was a very emotional time for a lot of people. We didn't know what was going to happen. I remember one of the first weekends after the lockdown, you know, when I went out, I mean, I was dressed in like I was going into a nuclear reactor, because that's what it was, you know. But you've also got to be able to balance your emotions, you know. We all know that feelings play a major role in everybody's life. And sometimes emotions are so strong, they can either make you extremely happy or extremely sad. So you've got to be able to balance that. And I think if you do that, if you do all those things that I've mentioned, it's the only way you're going to be able to see the best of yourself. And then you're able to face any challenge. Remember, like we have said, COVID is but one of the challenges that we've had to face. I think the only thing is that it's how extensive and widespread its impact was, all at the same time. But you've got to be able to do that so that you can see the best of yourself, whatever the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Taffy. Robyn, there's a question that came through the chat box directed at you. The question is, how do we bring transformational leadership in learning and development since the objectives and competencies are preset?
Can you just run that by me again, Sameera?
The question is, how do we bring in transformational leadership in learning and development since the objectives and competencies are preset?
Okay. Good question. I think, okay, everything within an organization, and I'm sure Sameera with you in the HR field will know that people complete their WSPs and ATRs, and usually with a development that is already there. What is very important is that we need to look at organizational strategies. We also need to look at the leadership profiles, leadership that we want to develop within an organization. Now, if they are already preset, are you referring to then if a company has already done their workplace skills plan for the year? Is that going ahead? Would you say it's that?
I would assume so. There's not too much context given in the question, but I would imagine that organizations have job descriptions which they've given out to employees, and now they're having to redefine some of those things. So how would they need to do that from a learning and development point of view, or how would learning and development aid that process?
No. I can only bring it back to myself, to ourselves, what we did at the learning organization. You know, we had about 2 weeks to decide, when we were told about lockdown. And if I'm looking at everybody's job role or job description has changed. Nobody lost their jobs, but we had to look at job descriptions. Does it fit in? And the roles that we've given, the duties, does that actually fit in with where we are going to? leading the way forward. And so in terms of transformation, it is about the people. It is about empowering the people, moving them forward. So in terms of learning and development, it's definitely, we get a lot of the requirements, obviously, from the industry, from the HR side, but there's a lot of consulting to see what are the job descriptions, what are people required to do, and do they have the necessary skills to actually lead them forward into the fourth industrial revolution skills, into the SCARE skills, which is about your problem solving, your decision-making skills, your emotional intelligence, and so forth. So definitely there's a huge change within the requirements in terms of skills requirements going forward, because the skills that most of us have currently no longer serves us, or will no longer serve us going forward.
Sameera,
thank you so much.
There's a question for you, Sameera, and I think it came up a few times by a lot of people. And it says, Sameera, as female employees, we generally face lots of hurdles. How did you triumph? What would you recommend that we do? And would you recommend that we have mentors to succeed?
Absolutely. I think that's such a great question. And I think women in the workplace, despite the transformation agenda, despite the labor legislation that speaks to gender empowerment, organizations are still very slow to embrace women in leadership. And I think that those hurdles are very, very real. And it's going to take some time to transform. I mean, there's major issues in terms of pay disparity. The number of women that sit in CEO positions of, your top 100 companies in South Africa, the percentage is incredibly low. And I think, if you are an aspiring woman leader, I think it's important to firstly know what your purpose is, and align yourself with people that are on the same journey as you. Having a mentor is a fantastic idea, because that individual will help you to harness some of those skills that you're looking to develop, and will help you to become more aware around your blind spots, which is particularly important. What I would say to these aspiring leaders, female leaders, is to never give up. There will be adversity, but it will make you stronger. And when you get into that leadership position, don't forget about women that are below you, because what we also find in the workplace, and what I find with a lot of my coachees, is the fact that there aren't enough women empowering other women. And there sometimes is this unhealthy competition that gets created, and it creates a context in the workplace that speaks to, women are emotional, or women are not great leaders. And in order to refute that narrative, it's important to build relationships with these women by empowering them and allowing them to step up onto that ladder of success. Because the reality is that, we can all shine, and there's enough of a platform for all of us. So I think it's important to find your purpose, and to align yourself with the right people. Find that mentor, but identify what skills you're looking to develop, and then form a path that looks at, okay, how am I going to get there? What are the specific things I need to be doing in order to get there? And once I'm there, how can I influence change within my organization to address those issues of discrimination, to address those pay disparities, and to continue to empower women? Because the reality is that in order for women to truly be empowered, we really got to relook that social and economic power balance. And at the moment, it is so disproportionate. So the best way to do that is to find yourself the right type of mentor, and yeah, once you are in that position, make a path for other women to follow.
Yeah. I Fully agree with you. I think, we have sort of acts and things that go into this, but I think it's important that we see more women rise up into leadership positions, and we see, more women having a seat at the table, because we need to move away from, the preconceived notions that women are not allowed to speak. They have a voice and they should be heard. And I fully agree with you, Sameera, and I see you breaking down barriers and walls. So well done.
Thank you. Kyle, if I could just add one other point to that, I think there was a question somewhere in the chat that spoke to the fact that transformation is quite slow, particularly in male-dominated industries. And if you look at the ICT industry and you look at the construction industry, you'll find that women-led businesses make up a very small percentage within those industries. There's a company called Mbokoto Construction, which is a female-led construction company, but one of the very few. In fact, I think female-led businesses in the construction industry make up something as little as 8%. So the reality is that in order to break down those barriers, we've got to be supportive of each other, and we've got to create that awareness and rise, like you say, and make our voices heard, because it's got to count for something. Also, in order for us to build a more sustainable future for South Africa or any other country in the world, we've got to empower women, because ultimately a lot of the change rests within women.
Yeah. No, definitely. Taffy, there was a question for you in the chat. I just want to find it because I thought it was quite interesting. It was directed at you from, where are we? There we go. It was directed from you from Matleong Lawrence. And he said, Taffy, how do you deal with people in senior leadership positions that are not living the values of the organization?
I think, thanks, Kyle, and thanks for that question. I think this is similar to what you spoke about your first time when you went into leadership. And, you've got to be measured, you've got to understand the environment, and you've got to question the status quo. That's the first thing. And one thing that I have learned is that facts are stubborn. And if I get the question correctly, it's people do not want to change. So I'm assuming that there is compelling evidence for them to change, right? And as I said, facts are stubborn. What I do is I get the data. I put together a very compelling case of how the current culture and the way things are happening is impacting on the business's ability to perform. And once you start having those conversations and you're looking at leading indicators before you get to the financial performance one, and you will be able to then have a conversation around there is a need to change. And once you get to that point and you're having those conversations, that conversation will only go one way in terms of what is it that needs to change, and then you're home free.
Thank you, Taffy. Just on there is a follow-up question in terms of, actually for Robyn. I'm just trying to find it quickly. How do you try and convince a leader that it's important to consider the ideas of other management members so that the organization can grow and be a shining example?
Was this in one of the, is this in the Q&A section or on the chat function? Can I just have a read?
Sure.
On the chat function.
Okay, so it's on the Q&A section, and it says, how do you try and convince a leader that it is important to consider the ideas of other management members so that the organization can grow and be a shining example?
Oh gosh, leadership versus management, right? Here it goes. So if I'm really thinking of how do you as a leader convince a manager, yeah, guys, here I need some help with, I can't see the question here. I just want to try and see if I can read the question so I can read it. Whoops, can't see it there.
I think if I can just come in while you're trying to get to the question, Robyn. It comes back to the point that I've tried to articulate, that remember in business, businesses are out there to, you know, Goldratt, I think, who says, you know, the goal of a business is to make money, you know, and we can never run away from that. So whatever it is, whatever change we are trying to push through in the business, you must be able to show how that will impact the business as a whole. And because businesses will not change for the sake of change, you know, there's got to be a compelling reason for them to change. And as a manager trying to influence a leader, I think it's imperative for you to be able to create that case study of this is what is happening and this is why we are not at the level of, you know, where we could be. And what is impacting and highlighting those obstacles and how they're impacting on the business's ability to perform. And once you do that, once you start getting to that conversation and you're sharing that data and you're looking at it, then it becomes easier for them to actually see, because all leaders would want their business to perform phenomenally. And if you can articulate the fact that staff retention is low because people are leaving, and therefore the business is always in a constant cycle of trying to retrain new skills and get them moving, there must be something that is triggering that failure to retain staff, as an example. And once you're able to pull together that information, it becomes easier to present that case. Unfortunately, you know, it's the only way, I believe, because I've used it before. I've been able to paint a clear picture of the obstacles that are in the way. And once that has become apparent, the conversation about the need to change becomes much, much easier, and you get the buy-in.
No. Thank you, Taffy, for that. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic insight. Kyle, if I could just ask you, there's a question here that says, change is not for everyone and most people resist change. So how does a leader, how do you encourage a leader who is discouraged or affected by change?
So I think, you know, change is there and change is there to stay. I think it's also, you know, vitally important that we embrace change to be transformational leaders, to, you know, to move forward. I think it's also important that, you know, when we're going or when we're embarking on change, it's important about the communication. It's important about the why are we changing. And I personally like to use a model called ADKAR, which is done by ProSci. And I know there's various change, you know, methodologies and strategies out there, and they work. You know, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. And sometimes you're going to have to use various theories of change to help you. But there's one specifically change model that I like, which is called ADKAR. And it starts off with really creating that awareness, creating the awareness with everybody of why do we need to change. It's then about building that desire to change. So once you're building that desire in, you're giving them the knowledge to actually change. And then, you know, it's there about, you know, after that, it's really about reinforcing that change and giving them the ability to make that transition. Because so often in companies, you know, we think that we're implementing a new system, for example, and it's quite easy, you know, we're implementing a new system, the system is live, here you go, log on and carry on. But we don't create that buy-in. And I'll refer to one of the comments I made yesterday, which was human beings always want self-benefit. It's always about what's in it for me. How do I benefit from this if I'm going to change? And it's really about creating that awareness and desire to change so we know how beneficial it can be for us, so we get something out, as well as the organizations moving forward. And I think that's so, so important because we get faced with that all the time. There's this resistance to change, especially from leadership, because they're so set in ways of doing things that they're afraid to actually make that adjustment.
Absolutely, Kyle. Sorry, some feedback there. Kyle, there is a question that I'd just like to answer. It was posed to me in terms of transformation, and the question was around, actually it's just been put into the chat box. around why women leaders come second to male leaders, especially in government. Do we really trust female leaders enough? That is, you know, female presidents, are we ready or not? And I think that that is such a fantastic question, especially from a gender empowerment point of view. And I think there was a similar question around, you know, whether business is ready to embrace female leadership. Or whether, you know, there's a difference between female leadership and male leadership. I don't necessarily think that female leadership is better than male leadership or vice versa. I think people lead, you know, in a way that's innate to them based on specific leadership theories or situations or experiences that they've had. And I don't necessarily think that one is better than the other. But what I do think is that female leaders do bring a sense of empathy that comes quite naturally to them. And if we look at COVID as an example, and we look at countries like New Zealand and like South Korea and how they've managed to maintain the number of infections within their country with minimal impact to the economy, what you can see there is that it wasn't just a sense of empathy, but it was a sense of connectedness to their citizens, where there was complete buy-in in terms of that agenda to contain the virus, in terms of understanding why those regulations were put in, and that helped to contain that virus across those countries. So I think female leadership is something that is continuously evolving. There's a lot more awareness around it, and I do think that businesses are placing a lot more, you know, emphasis on creating empowerment programs that allow women to progress into higher ranks. What I would like to see from organizations and what I do with my clients is to help accelerate that process, to ensure that these women are not just tick boxes for your BE scorecard, but rather have the necessary skills to be empowered and to deliver on the objectives of the organization so that their leadership is credible and it's tangible to the bottom line.
No, definitely. I think it's so important to understand, you know, especially around moving forward with transformation of female leaders into the workplace. You know, and I think, you know, that translates into one of the questions that came to Robyn now, which says, how do you create leadership transformation in the new normal?
Okay, yeah, leadership in the new normal. So I think if I'm really looking at that question, I think there are two different parts to it that I would like to address. When everything happened, I think the first thing I did was I checked in with myself. I did a thorough reality check, also to raise my awareness, you know, of who am I as a person, what is my leadership style, my beliefs, my values, my strengths, and what are some of my development areas that I need to face. So that's the first thing that I did, you know, checking in with myself. I then checked in with my team. I needed to look at what are their strengths, what's their development areas, you know, how is what they are doing, how can that really help us moving forward? And then this was like myself, my team, and then I looked at the climate in which we operate. You know, we've spoken about COVID. We're talking about the digital age, you know, fourth industrial revolution. And also, I think combined with that is the VUCA world, you know, the volatility, the uncertainty, and how does the team actually fit in to all of this new climate, and what do we need to do? So where are the gaps? You know, where do we start upskilling the people? And also, you know, where did I need to start upskilling myself?
Yeah.
So some areas which actually came to mind was really in the area of, and I think Tafi also mentioned, you know, change, you know, how we're managing change. We need to increase our emotional intelligence. We need to build resilience, problem solving. I think I've mentioned some of these before, you know, also like decision making, even that has changed, because in the past when we were more certain of things, we could go back in time and we could find solutions. Whereas with this new industry, with this new climate that we are in, nobody really knew what to expect or what the next step could be. So it was definitely, as I said, it's really two parts, you know, like checking in first. And then the second part of transformation is really around your organizational strategies and also your leadership pipeline.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking in terms of that, you know, creating and aligning your organizational strategies to create and develop a leadership pipeline within your organization. So we need to take into consideration, you know, with companies, your EE plan, your employment or your employee development plans, and also then implement transformation strategies.
Yeah.
Your transformation strategies must not only provide the chance for new leadership to enter into leadership roles, but also to develop and enhance the skills of your employees to become successful leaders. And I think when we're also looking at this, it's in terms of your strategy is not really, it's not a standalone component.
Yeah.
And it's really there to optimize and maximize the complete success of transformation.
Yeah, no, good points, Robyn. Very, very good points. Sameera, there was a question for you. It says, the term coaching has come up in the workplace. How does one enhance the ability to coach other employees in a workplace? And are there different types of coaching?
Thank you, Kyle. Thanks for that question. And I think coaching is such an important component, not just of self-development, but of team development. And if you think about, you know, organizational effectiveness and you think about goal setting, coaching is really a great way to enhance the productivity of your organization and your team. There are various methods of coaching. You know, there's the infamous one, and the one I can probably speak to right now, because the session is so short, is probably the GROW model. So you can Google it, but the GROW model is literally about setting goals. It's about understanding what is it that you want right now. What is your reality? So the R stands for reality. What is your reality? Where are you right now? O is the options. What could you do? And the W is what will you do? So if you follow that GROW model, you'll help to help that individual to create a clear path from where they are to where they want to be. You'll be able to allocate tools and resources to enable them to achieve those goals. And it's a really easy tool to use to coach individuals. And I think it's something that's becoming more and more integral in leadership development.
Yeah. Taffy, there was a question for you that came up that says, can a leader be both transformational and transactional? And I think it talks a little bit from the coaching and grow model that Sameera mentioned, you know, of how they can develop. But can a leader be both transformational and transactional?
Thanks, Kyle. My view is that absolutely. And I think as much as we have spoken about these different leadership theories, I think the reality is you've got to be able to transition from one type to another. And those people who can do that with ease usually make the best leaders. So we've got to contextualize this in a business sense. Businesses, I will repeat again, you know, it's going to sound like a stuck record, are out there to remain viable. Let me change the words this time. Out there to remain viable. And there is a very important and critical element for you to manage the transactional processes that keep the internal mechanics ticking on a daily basis. And that requires somebody who's transactional, who's process focused, who can drive efficiency, who can push it. Where you then need the transformational side of things is, remember, we spoke about the need to humanize and the need to remember that in most cases you're dealing with individuals. So as much as you might want to drive performance and drive efficiency, and you know, that transformational aspect then comes in terms of how do you continuously motivate people without necessarily monetary rewards, but also how you motivate them. So in my view, you need both. You need to be both transactional and transformational in order for you to be a good leader and in order for your business to thrive.
Yeah, Very true. Very,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kyle, there's a question that asks, how do you lead when you are a junior in the department? I happen to be the junior in my business unit. However, I'm appointed to lead the risk register as the risk champion of my business unit. Because of my position, it becomes difficult at times to enforce responsibilities to my superiors.
Sure. If I may ask, who was the question from?
It was anonymous, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Well, Anonymous, thank you for your question. I think that was quite important. I think, you know, how do you lead your people, you know, always, you're being in a junior position? You know, I think that, again, what we've been recapping in the last few days as well, and the things that we were mentioning was that you don't need to be in a position to lead. But even though you are in a junior position, you have that ability to now influence and lead not only your department and team, but you have that ability to lead upwards. You have that ability to influence upwards. And it is really about having those conversations. It's about really setting those expectations about what is the vision and where do we want to move forward. And this is how I think we can get there. And you know, coming up with, you know, especially when you're in sort of a middle management, and I think Taffy mentioned this in his presentation when we were talking about the different levels of management and the types of leadership that is in there. And I'm not sure if you want to maybe share a little bit about that as well, but you know, it's really about being in that position, embracing it, learning the skills and attributes that you have to contribute to that position, but also about, you know, how can I influence top management? You know, you also don't want to say things that will get you fired as well, but it's important to really, you know, make sure that we're having the conversations that are relevant. Taffy, I see you nodding your head in agreement.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I find, and throughout my career, that I found throughout my career as I've moved through the ranks, is usually when you're promoted, if I can use that word, it's taking you out of your comfort zone. It's really taking you into the unknown. And there's usually a tendency by a lot of people to try and do the things that they know because they're afraid of that failure, you know, and this is where you tend to find that you then fail to lead because you're now doing people's work and you're always trying to then say to your staff that, you know, the way you did it is the way you want it done without necessarily leading them and looking at other things because you're drawn to what you're comfortable with. So, and when we spoke about as you transition throughout the organization, you know, you start off with a very high degree of technical skills. And, you know, as you move up, that's got to be swapped out with a little bit of people skills so that you're now able to manage people. And you've got to back your people. You've got to trust them. You've got to allow them to actually do the job. And some of them might not necessarily do the job the way you did it. They might actually come up with better ways of doing it if you give them the chance and if you back them. And at the very top, you know, you've now got to understand the environment that you're operating in. I think Robyn spoke about a VUCA environment, which is the current now. So you've now got to have that skill to understand that things are uncertain, things are changing, they're volatile. And how do you take all of that information and share it with everybody else? So by then, you know, your technical skill, you might be able to have a conversation about how to code, for example, but, you know, it's not what you're expected to do. If you're still coding at the highest level in an IT organization, for example, then there's something wrong with that organization.
Taffy, thank you so much. Just staying on the topic of inclusivity and innovation, Kyle, there was a question for you that came from Musa Wenkosi, and his question asks, since transformational leadership involves inclusivity and innovation, how do you then ensure that you do not end up hurting other people's feelings, since it's impossible to take everyone's idea?
I think, you know, it's important to understand that as a leader, sometimes you're not going to be liked. You're not going to be the most popular one, and that's okay. And I think, you know, when we're talking about inclusivity and diversity, you know, it's quite of a broad topic, but in the sense that it can be broken down. And if you think about inclusivity, you know, it's really about including people. It's about including their ideas. It's about including their opinions. And it's also about respect. And as a leader, you need to make sure that you are respecting the people that are following you. It's not just about gaining their respect, but you respecting them. And in terms of, when it comes to their ideas without hurting their feeling, there's no idea that's a bad idea. And, Richard Branson, if you read his book, he talks about, for every 100 bad ideas, there's one good one. So you'll never know which could be that 101 good idea that comes out from that employee or that follower. But it's important to hear them, give them that voice to speak, because it shows that you are including them in the conversation. It shows that you actually consider their input, that they are valuable to your team. Their contribution is valued, and that's important. And it's also, great when you say, I hear your idea, but maybe that's not the best suited idea for this sort of strategy right now, but we'll keep that in the parking lot. So you also don't want to disclude them straight away, because then they won't contribute in the later on conversations. So, again, no idea is good, neither is any idea bad, but I always use the context, no one's ugly. Some just are prettier than the others. But it's important to remember that, we bring through their ideas, so we are able to include them in the conversations. And it's okay to say, listen, I don't think this idea is going to work now. We haven't thought about a few things. Maybe let's check on it. Let's research a bit more, and maybe we can explore it, because maybe they haven't thought about the full spectrum or the 360 view of it. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. I think Kyle, I just want to step in and also just add to what you're saying, that there's pressure, to accept every idea. And what I found that what I use is, if you've got an idea, don't just say that idea. Let's see how it would work. So let's see the end to end of your idea. So it's easy for somebody to put up their hand and say, okay, I feel this. And once you're able to walk them through, and it's not just to try and get them to not contribute, but to also try and show them how that idea may not be the appropriate one, to say, okay, fine, let's see that idea, just go back, let's put it together, let's see how it would work, what would you do here and what would you do there? And sometimes they're the ones who actually come back and say, you know what, I've thought about it, that idea wasn't, but if I change it like this and so on, then make them part of the process of even the implementation of some of those ideas. And you then find that the quality of the ideas that you deal with improves significantly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Robyn, if I could just defer to you, there's a question here for you from Mikael Ryan. And he asks, how do you ensure effective and efficient learning through different industries post-COVID? And how do you plan for less face-to-face outcomes as industries move away from brick and mortar operations? Some of the sectors will need on-the-job interaction, like online, etc., but this poses a different challenge of its own. Do you have a plan for the evolution of technology through learning? And how effective do you predict this will become?
Yeah, thank you, Sameera. Yes, look, everything has changed. I think from a learning and development perspective, I would say in the past, 100% of all of our training interventions were face-to-face, either at the client site or a public course at our training venues, also brick and mortar. So obviously with digital transformation, where people are no longer required, even during lockdown, where people couldn't attend training, yet this organizations and the people therein still required the training, we had to act extremely quickly. Now, because we had computers at the office, additional laptops, so to speak, with our workforce, we could have given them that because we do IT training. What we are finding now, obviously, is that training is virtual. There are different types of platforms that we are utilizing now. The one could be your what we call a VOLT session, your virtual instructor-led training, which is pretty much face-to-face training, but online. Other options that we are looking at is your blended training approach, whereas we've got videos where we've had our facilitators go through certain content, and this is both on short courses, but also on our learnerships, the full qualifications, whereas learners watch videos about pre-recorded content, and then also combined with the virtual sessions. And then from time to time, what we've done then is, if people are really struggling, is that they do come to the office. But then obviously not the larger amounts of people that we used to have in the past. So I'm also looking at, if we're looking at the question, you know, how effective is it, or, you know, is this going to, you know, how effective is it, and can we predict the future, what is going to happen? I would say virtual training, online webinars, what we are doing now, is there to stay. No matter what is going to change in future. I think we are all getting used to the new platforms, what we are utilizing. Obviously, you know, you've got Zoom. We're also utilizing a lot of Microsoft Teams for people. There are challenges. Obviously, the main challenge that does remain is internet connection. So part of the offering, what we do is, instead of learner guides, what people receive now, they'll receive a tablet, and we also provide them with data for the duration of their learnership or their qualification, or so to speak. However, as I've just said, the challenge is data, but it's also connection. It's also, we do have remote learners. If I'm thinking of unemployed people, previously unemployed and disadvantaged people that is attending the courses, for those learners, we've actually got in place that they do on occasion come to our office, and then we make available to them to attend the training or sit in one of our training rooms to then access the material, the content, and watch the videos and complete their formal portfolio of evidence. So it is a challenge, but I think it's here to stay. I don't think we still have requirements for face-to-face training, but that is becoming less and less.
Thank you, Robyn. Just staying on the subject of technology, Taffy, I'm not sure if you want to weigh in here. There was a question from Chikwakwa Homotso, who asks, the fourth industrial revolution is now upon us. He wants to know whether we are ready or not in terms of technology, and is the current ICT leadership and industry ready to grow the economy?
Got to be very careful with my answer there. I think what I've seen in that space and the conversations that are happening, and the disappointment for me, is that they are not taking into account some very, very big obstacles that we have in order for us to be able to fully utilize the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution. We have a big problem with data in South Africa, I think, and until we're able to sort that out, getting the full value of the fourth IR is just going to be a talk show. And we need to start seeing action around trying to open up that constriction that is there, that constraint, because nothing will work. Robyn was talking about trying to deliver training to individuals virtually. And you can have all the tools, you can have all the material, but if somebody is in an area where where connectivity is bad, if somebody is in an area where they have no network at some points, then the training experience is going to be, you know, the user experience on the other side is very, very bad, you know? So until we unlock some of those issues, we're not going to be able to get some of the full value of the fourth industrial revolution. There is huge potential in utilizing some of the advances in technology from a medical perspective, from you know, just trying to make people's lives better. But I think we have serious challenges and we need to address those. And then obviously, because we've also got capacity and capability challenges, I think it also speaks to the skills gap that also exists with the fourth IR. I think most of industry in South Africa was built for brick and mortar, and that change has not really taken place, you know, and it's a process as well. So there are issues that we need to address, but there's huge benefit that we can get from the fourth IR. But we've got to lift those restrictions that we currently face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one, Taffy. It really, really is important, you know, from that perspective of 4IR, and we sort of acknowledge that. There was a question for Sameera. It was directed from Anonymous. It says, I believe that in order to be a good leader, you need to be a good follower. Is this true? And what skills should a leader have to ensure that they are a good follower? Good question.
That's a great question. I think it was actually Aristotle that said this, and I definitely agree that the reality is that, you know, leaders must be comfortable to also be followers. Just as a cleaner in a company is being led by their team leader, the CEO is being led by a board. Your CEO is accountable to the board, must deliver on objectives of the board. There's this book called The Power of Followership by Robert Kelly. And it says that leadership affects organization success or failure by only 20%. And that actually means that followers can influence the organization's effectiveness by as much as 80%. That's enormous. This means that good followers matter just as much as good leaders. So in my mind, in terms of the skills that are needed for leaders to be good followers, or for people to be good followers, you should be a self-starter, be an independent thinker. These are usually people that see themselves as leaders in training. Be a team player, because the reality is that once you get to the top, it's your team that keeps you there. Building those good relationships with your team members will ensure that you are successful. Yeah. What I think is also important in being a good follower is to believe in the vision and the purpose of the company. Because if you believe in it, you unconsciously connect what you do to why you do it. Thank you.
Very true. Very, very, very true. There was a question here. It was from Sampiwed Lamini, who said, Kyle, is it that we need to assist? Is it that we need to always think of change as something that, sorry, it just popped away from my question, as something that should come from managers, or what? Because my thinking is that through data analysis or reports, managers and their teams are able to detect an unwelcoming trend as far as the organization objectives. So I think with effective communication, with high employee engagement, change will be obvious situation to detect problems. Then the team has to discuss what needs to be changed, but everyone have to agree to the change. Is this my opinion? I think that is true. I think that, you know, change is there. And I think it's also important that we're using some of these change tools that we have to help support managers make their decision. I mean, in the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen the role of business intelligence, business analytics really transform the space of environments where we've seen more and more businesses want these sort of skills in their business to really help them transform, to really help them use this and communicate this effectively. You know, I mean, Taffy can also share, you know, the role of business analyst is so important and so critical that when we, you know, sort of doing transformation and change, that their feedback is important to help facilitate that change in the organization.
Absolutely, Kyle. If you don't have somebody who's able to look at numbers and be able to present that numbers, those numbers in a manner which allows you to make decisions, what tends to happen is that you spend hours on end with everybody trying to crunch data, and then they all come up with different perspectives and so on. So the role of the business analyst is critical. And this is where you start seeing some of these new skills that are beginning to come into the workplace, because there is huge amounts of data that you have to go through, you know, in terms of trying to understand the market, trying to understand your customer, trying to understand what your processes are able to deliver, and how you continually, you know, stay ahead of the competition. So it's critical to start bringing in these new skills into the organization. And I think, was it Simpiwe who raised that question?
Yes.
My apologies if I've got the name wrong. But it's so vital for that information to be available at all levels throughout the organization so that people can take corrective action and not only wait for the leadership to actually then come in and say, right, okay, this is where we are going. So yeah, I cannot overemphasize the need for somebody to be within the business who's able to unpack some of these numbers and give people information that they can use to make decisions. And the quicker you're able to make decisions from the data that you're getting, the better your business is going to perform.
Yeah, so very true, very true. I think, it's so important that, we use these sort of, tools to help manage our business going forward. There was a question here. It says, it's not directed at anyone, but I don't know if Sameera, you want to take a stab at this. It's from Liesel Hakati, who says, in an environment where those in leadership are yet to evolve from the great man theory, what advice can you give to those that want to lead and influence other people?
Sorry, I missed a portion of that, Kyle. Could you just repeat that?
I think the context of the question from Liesel is how do you get, or what advice would you give to people that want to lead and influence other people?
I think the first thing you've got to understand is who those individuals are that you want to influence. If you understand who they are, what their motivators are, you are then able to connect with them on a level that creates buy-in, that creates inclusivity, that creates a sense of belonging. And once you start to understand them and they start to understand you, you are then able to connect what you need them to do to your purpose. And I think that is the route to success. I think we spent a lot of time over the last couple of days talking about leadership, inclusivity in particular. And I mean, the ability to influence is really just about people. So before we are able to connect with each other on an employer-employee level, we must connect with each other on a human-to-human level. And I think once we get that right, the ability to influence is that much more powerful.
Yeah, very, very true. There was a question that came up for me. It says from Polius Palmer, says, what is the shape of the perfect leader and does he or she exist? I don't think there's a perfect leader. I think, we all have good leadership traits and we all can become great leaders. I don't necessarily think that, we all make mistakes and leaders will make mistakes, and that's okay. But it's also okay for us as leaders to own up to our mistakes and take responsibility and accountability for our action as leaders. And if we made the mistake, we shouldn't shift blame. We should be able to own that, because what that does is, think of your leader that makes mistakes and comes to you and really apologizes to you to say, listen, I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. I misinformed you, but this is the correct information. You gain a new level of trust. You gain a new level of respect for this leader because you know for a fact that, they are ones that can actually take ownership of this. I'm just trying to go through. Sure, the questions are coming in. I think, Sam, do you have a question?
There's a question here. I'm not sure who wants to give a stab to it. Maybe you, Kyle. There's a question from Anonymous that asks, how does authentic leadership work along EQ?
So I think, emotional intelligence is very important, and it's really about, being authentic. Sorry, the question was about authentic leadership. Am I right? I think, authenticity really comes with your behavior. It also comes with the fact that, if you're authentic, are you living by what you're saying? Are you living yourself by what you expect your followers to live by? And that's sort of how you want to really, in a very short version, because of time, measure authenticity. And are they really being true to themselves? But I think what's also important is, as a leader, you know, are you being true to yourself, and how are you being true to your people, which is quite important. Sorry, I see the time going by, so I'm trying to answer the questions as quickly and as short as possible, but I hope we're getting through this.
Thank you, Kyle, for that. I just, I've also just noticed the time. I think it's been the fastest 90 minutes I've ever experienced. To the participants, what we do want to say is that if we haven't answered your questions, we will absolutely answer these questions via email. So please don't despair. I just want to quickly defer to Taffy just as a wrap up. Taffy, if there is one quote that you think every leader, aspiring leader, every one of these participants should know, what would that be?
So I think we've spoken a lot about leadership, and we've spoken about what we define, you know, what we should see in a leader. And the quote I want to share with everybody is something that Martin Luther King Jr. said. So I've changed it slightly just so that it's gender sensitive. But the quote is, and the reason why I love this quote is that leadership is good when things are going well, you know? But the moment you hit some kind of turbulence, you have two choices. You can either take those, you know, the turbulence head on and power through, or you can try and avoid it. And Martin Luther King says the ultimate measure of a leader is not where they stand in the moments of comfort, but where they stand at times of challenge and controversy. And I think that for me, you know, is if I have a leader who stands up in those times and he backs me and you know, and all of that, I think that for me is the ultimate.
Thank you. That's incredibly profound. Robyn, if I can also just come to you quickly. Can you name a person who has had a tremendous impact on you as a leader?
Sure. Sameera, yes. Can I give you two?
Sure.
I think firstly, I want to say I'm quite a fan of Elon Musk. I love his innovative and creative spirit. I think he doesn't let anything get in his way of what he wants to achieve. You know, very innovative, thinking of different things, how to move things forward. And secondly, Eckhart Tolle. I don't know how many of you know of him. He's best known for his book, The Power of Now. A great spiritual teacher that's kind of live in the moment. It's not about the past. You can't do anything about the past. You cannot live in the future because, as we know, it's incredibly uncertain. So it is what you are doing now. What are you doing today that is actually affecting your life and the lives of others and the future going forward? So yes, those are the two people that I really look up to.
Wonderful. Kyle, last thoughts from you. What 3 books would you recommend to our participants?
Sure. I read a lot, so 3 books is going to be quite hard. So the current book that I'm reading now, I'm not going to say the full name because we're on a webinar, but one of the books that I'm reading now, it's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving A. And I think it's really such a good book for, you know, what aspiring leaders that we're talking about, and if you really want to be good leaders. But, you know, I picked up the book and it was so hard for me to let it down because it was so relevant and so realistic. You know, to be reading that book and understanding some of the comments, and it's in a way you sort of reflect on yourself, but that is a phenomenal book. So a lot of people are going to get those as Christmas presents. But another book, because you said 3, right? Another book I would think, so this is a book that I actually read twice when I first became in a leadership position, and that question was, The book was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I do know that I think there's an 8th habit and a 9th habit now as well. But the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is really a phenomenal book. And one of the chapters that stood out to me there was, sharpening your saw. And that's what really makes you a good leader. It is really about sharpening your saw. And the last book is Good to Great. And I think it's a book that really talks about, some companies and how they make that step to leap, and how do they take the organization from being good to great. And it's really, sort of like a full package of how do we do this. I think, those sort of things are important as a leader. You need to read, you need to be able to have knowledge. And I see there's a question. Sameera, what is your last advice to those in attendance today? What would be your last thought of advice for them?
Sure, okay. There's some pressure here. So my last advice to those in attendance would be that, you've just sat through a 3-day short course on leadership, and essentially leadership is about effecting change. It's about making things better for those around you, and it's not just limited to your organization. If you think about your community, think about your family, think about the world around you, the country that you live in, we all have the capacity to step up and do something different and be something better, or to make the future a better place. What's also important to take note of is that self-development is particularly important to your leadership journey. It's important to develop that sense of self, become aware of those biases. I think yesterday we spoke about unconscious biases and the impact that it can have on those around you. If you unpack those default behaviors that are triggered by learned experiences, you are there, you are really able to challenge some of those biases and change how you lead, change how you respond to situations or people. There's a quote by Maya Angelou, and she says that people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And that's particularly indicative of a great leader. So, while we all aspire to be leaders, just be cognizant of the responsibility that is associated with that leadership title. And yeah, all the best.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for your attendance today. Thank you for all the questions. I think in total we've had we've answered 57 and we've still got 66 questions left. So we will answer your questions. It will be emailed through to us, so we'll definitely get you the answers to this. I wish we had more days. It was really quite informative. I've learned a lot. So a special thank you to Sameera, Taffy, and Robyn for joining us as panels. Thank you to Prof and the team at Regent Business School for setting this up. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. And I wish you all well, and I'll hand you over back to Prof.
Thank you, Kyle. I just want to also say thank you to the panel, including yourself, Kyle. Thanks for your participation over the last 3 days. Again, judging from the comments on the chat, everybody seems to have enjoyed it. Clint, Nicole, Nolwazi, Jabulani, to name just a few, talking about the wonderful experience and the takeaways that they've had, and that the amount of enjoyment over the last 3 days, I think that speaks volume for the panel and the presenters, as well as in terms of the appreciation of the participants. And for that, we are grateful. And hopefully this will be an ongoing series of webinars where we can tackle other topics or related to leadership, but maybe focus a little bit more on some aspects of leadership in future webinars. And for the panelists, please complete and please give us some feedback in terms of what kind of things, sorry, not the panelists, the participants, what kind of things you would like to attend, what kind of areas that you might find interesting, and perhaps from Regent Business School and using the panelists that we have here, we could do more of these things. But thank you once again, and we wish you a safe existence in terms of keeping safe and practicing social distancing and being safe. And thanks again, and wish you just good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very
I don't
much.
know about the panel, if you want to come in here. All right. Thanks very much again. And yeah, we will end this particular session. Thank you.